This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of January 31st, 2022. And the subject of this week's podcast is don't stream the big game. Now, right away, I want you to know, we all know what big game I'm talking about. And I could probably say the name of the game if I wanted to, because this podcast isn't very big. It's not known by that many people, and I get away with it. But you're not supposed to say the name of the game without permission from the NFL if you're using it in any sort of advertising capacity. And so, well, like I said, this is a football game. It's the last football game of the season, and it's going to be available to watch on local television and pay TV and streaming. So, I say again, don't stream the big game. What should you do? You should watch the big game on antenna TV or on pay TV. Antenna television is going to be the best in most cases because it's going to give you the quickest results. You will get every play about 3 seconds to 7 seconds faster than you would get it if you watch it on pay TV or streaming. And sometimes being first is probably the best way of going. It's going to be the way, if you're sitting there, just imagine being in an apartment and the people in the apartment next to you are watching on using an antenna and you're watching using streaming, and all of a sudden, they're cheering and you have to wait 7 seconds to find out why. I'll tell you, that's no fun, and you don't really want that. If you're going to watch using pay TV, DirecTV is the way to go there. There's every expectation the game's going to be available in 4K. I don't believe there's been an official announcement yet. Although I should say that most likely it's going to be the same kind of deal as it has been in prior years, where they're actually doing the capture in 1080p and then scaling it up to 4K. It's still going to look a little bit better in 4K than it would look in HD because of the way the bit rates work and all that other scientific stuff that you don't want to deal with. But it is going to be there. It won't be true 4K. It probably won't be. But that's fine. But do not stream the big game. Why? Because it is a recipe for disappointment, my friends. It is nothing but a chance for you to be unhappy. And I say that not just if you have a internet service provider that's never made you happy in the past and you always have bad speeds or whatever. But let me say, even if you have the best internet service provider, even if you're using AT&T's rock solid fiber, there's a great chance that you're going to be disappointed by streaming the big game. Streaming is different from broadcasting, and I've talked about this in other videos, and people don't really think about it. We're at this point in the world of entertainment. We just push a button. We push a button and something shows up. And we don't think about whether it's coming from the internet or whether it's coming from over-the-air television or from pay television, from a cable, from a satellite, whatever. We push our button, it shows up on the screen, we watch. That's how we do things. But it's very different. The technology for how it gets to our television is very different depending on whether it's broadcasting, which in other words is over-the-air or pay television like satellite TV, or streaming. Broadcasting is a one-to-many medium. That's kind of why they call it broadcasting. That's if you ever thought about that term. You probably didn't, but if you ever thought about it, broadcasting means it starts in one place and goes out to everybody equally. It's a very, very egalitarian way of getting everything to you. Everybody gets everything exactly the same way, exactly the same time. And it doesn't matter how many people are watching. If every single TV is tuned to the same channel in the same market, it doesn't matter. The tower is putting out the same signal one way or the other, and it doesn't even know how many people are receiving it. The same thing is true with satellite. That signal comes down from the satellite, and it doesn't matter how many people are watching it. And that makes it reliable. In a case like the Super Bowl, where you have some of the largest viewership numbers in the entire year, it makes it reliable because it's just as reliable whether one person is watching or whether everyone is watching. Now compare that with streaming. With streaming is what's called a narrowcast or multicast medium. In the case of most streaming, then every single person has their own individual connection to a server. You're watching something on Disney Plus or Netflix or whatever, you're the only one in your neighborhood doing it. There's a unique connection that's going out to that server on your time frame. You can pause, it doesn't affect anybody else. And when you start it over again, it's still just you. Now, that's great because you get it all exactly the way you want it, but it does congest that line. It means that everybody's streaming experience is taking up a different amount of bandwidth. That's a problem if everybody's streaming at once, especially if your internet service provider is also the cable company. Chances are they haven't designed the internet in your neighborhood so that everybody uses it at the same time. They're promising you that great speed, 200 megabit per second or whatever, but that speed falls apart if everybody in the neighborhood's streaming at the same time. You'll get that speed at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever, but you won't get good speed when it's just you. Now, when it comes to a live event like this, I almost said it, like the big game. You see what I almost said there? I almost said that name. When it comes to a live event like the big game, that's a multicast. You're joining a stream that's in process, which means it's coming from a single server, and it's not exactly unique to you. You're getting it the same as millions of other people, but it's still a stream that's coming into your home that might be different from what somebody else is watching. So the real question is, why do you care? Why do you care about any of that? Why do you care about any of that technology? Why can't you just push a button and have it be what you want it to be? Well, if everybody's using the internet at the same time, you know what happens. You know what happens when everybody in your house is using the internet at the same time. Now imagine what happens when everybody in every house is using the internet at the same time. I would be very, very surprised if this whole streaming thing goes off without a hitch. I'm pretty sure that it's Peacock that's going to be streaming this thing, and I'm sure this is a big thing for them. NBC Universal has wanted to push Peacock super hard over the last 2 years, and they haven't been able to do it. Here's another opportunity for them to show how well it's going to go. I'm just not convinced it's going to go well for them. I'd be a little bit surprised to find out there were no problems anywhere. And do you really want problems like that? I'm going to tell you two stories, and they actually tend to be intertwined. On November 17th, 1968, the Oakland Raiders were playing the New York Jets, and the game was televised. Except with about a minute and a half left to play, the network switched away from the game, and they started to air a scheduled movie, which happened to be Heidi, which was not exactly the most important thing that anybody showed. Well, it was one of those games, kind of like the most recent playoff games, where it was a last-minute upset and nobody saw it. And we still talk about it to this day, 54 years later. Now, here's an interesting coincidence. In the big game on February 1st, 2004, the halftime show starred Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson. Now, you all know what happened. Well, I didn't get to see it live. Why? Because, you see, I had a TiVo, and I paused because I was telling people the story of how the Heidi game was interrupted and how that didn't work out really well. And everybody was kind of curious about it, and I took a minute, and I was actually had some documentation of it. People hadn't heard of it or whatever. And as I was telling the story, my TiVo rebooted itself. It rebooted itself in the middle of the big game, and I didn't see the halftime show. It's not that I really wanted to see Janet Jackson. Well, we all know what happened with Janet Jackson. But it's a perfect example of how you do not want any sort of technical problems to take place while you're watching the big game. I had people over. We were doing a party. It was going to be a big thing. And now, anytime I talk about how I'm going to have a bunch of people over for the big game, and I'm struggling not to say the name of the big game, well, somebody inevitably reminds me of what happened back in 2004. Don't be that guy. Watch the big game on an antenna or with your pay TV service. If you need an antenna, if you need DirecTV installed, there's still time. Sign up by calling Signal Connect 888-233-7563 or shopping at solidsignal.com. That's how you do it. My friends, this podcast has been a blast to do. I will see you again next week. In the meantime, like, share, subscribe, do all those things that make me look good to my boss, and leave a comment wherever you get your podcasts.